Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. This is a show where we talk about sports and talk about all things sports, especially big picture issues in sports. We don't delve into the myriad of little tiny things, but we talk about big picture stuff. And so my name is Kevin Vendt. I am your host for tonight's show, and I'm here with my brother, Jonathan Vendt.
How are you all doing tonight?
All right, this is the second time on the show, and I think we have a pretty good show for tonight. Lots of weird things to talk about in sports tonight, as always, because it is supposed to be fun, and so our show tonight is going to be fun. Well, one of the things that I've noticed in sports that's happened recently is that people have the tendency to be a little dissatisfied with some of the rules and regulations that have changed or things that are different, or they just want to see things a little different in some of their favorite sports. And so one of the things that it kind of brought to my mind was a question, if I could change one thing in each of the four major sports, if I was commissioner for a day, what would I change? And so I'm going to start off with Jonathan asking you that question. If you could change one thing in Major League Baseball, what would you change?
With Major League Baseball, Commissioner Jonathan would probably look at instant replay. Of course, being a Boston sports fan, we all remember the Phantom Tag game where where that I don't even know which Yankee it was now. It's been so long ago, but he was.
Let's say it was Chuck Knobloch.
Yes, yes,
I think it was Chuck Knobloch.
I definitely blame Knobloch for that. How he technically tagged Jose Offerman out when we had Nomar Garciaparra coming up.
Right.
And you know, it's been a while since we made that much noise in the playoffs, and for the season to end there, it was just wasn't right. So, yeah, I would say they look into some sort of instant replay. Now, I know they already have maybe
they have
one like for like home runs on the line.
It's home runs only and fair foul. That's what they can look at. Fair foul or home runs, the only thing. And it's a kind of a strange system because they have to decide to do it. They have to go down into a booth and they actually have to call a guy in New York who's watching all the games. And then he decides whether or not it's fair foul, and then they come out, or he decides whether or not it's a home run or not a home run. And then he comes out and the umpires tell the decision. I think it's a clunky system. I think it can be changed. I agree with you on this about what I would change. I would add instant replay, and what I would do is I would add it for outs at the bags, okay, or tags, and catches in the outfield, as well as fair foul and home run. That's what I would add it for. And I would give each manager one challenge a game. And I would make it very simple. They call up to a replay umpire in a booth and say, are we right or are we wrong? He would look at it. He has 25 seconds to look at it. Yay or nay, right or wrong. You go with the umpire if you can't figure it out, just like in football, and then it would be done with. I don't think it would add much to the game, but there's been so many instances where, in the last couple of years, where it's clear on instant replay that the guy is out at first, or the guy is safe at first. And I just think it would make the game, everyone wants it to be done right. Everyone wants the right thing to happen. And I think that would make a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, some people would complain that it would take the game too long. You know, baseball as it is already a long game.
Right, especially Red Sox Yankees.
Yeah, but what you're proposing would only take probably only 30 seconds, so they could probably only fit, you know, one Dunkin' Donuts commercial or something like that. So
yeah, I mean, the way I would think of it is you'd probably put a 30-second limit on that replay.
Right.
So if you say it's going to take a few seconds to get it, I'm talking about adding 2 minutes to the game if each manager goes to replay.
Yeah.
You know, and they get one challenge a game. If they use it in the first inning and something bigger happens later on, that's a choice. I think there'd be a lot of games there'd be no challenges.
Right.
You know, so it's only in a couple of those games you might add 2 minutes. In a 3.5-hour game, making it 3 hours and 32 minutes isn't going to change the world.
Right.
You know, I think when you're talking about how long baseball games take, that's not the problem.
Right.
The problem is how long it takes a pitcher to get in there, how many times the batter steps out. I've heard someone mention about not allowing a catcher to visit the mound. You know, because it just adds all this time to the game. So that's what I would do. I would add the instant replay. It sounds like you would do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, other than balls and strikes, I don't like them arguing about balls and strikes. That should be off limits.
Yeah, I wouldn't use instant replay for balls and strikes. I think they would add too much to the game, and you have to allow for the human factor at some point. And I think, you know, if you could challenge a ball or a strike, I mean, that would just be ridiculous. Because even on the replay, it's not 100% clear. I don't care about the Amica pitch zone or something like that. It's not clear.
Hey, the pitch zone is always correct.
That's right. Or as Jerry Remy says, the Amica pitch zone. All right. Well, that's MLB. when we get to NFL, if I were Commissioner Kevin of the NFL, what I would change is I would bring back the kickoff. I think the NFL has lost something in the kickoffs after every touchdown at the beginning of the game, starting kicking off from the 35 instead of the 20, and the returns are way down. It is a little safer, but it just seems to me that some of the most exciting plays in football can be those kickoff returns, and they just don't seem to happen as often as they used to. And I think they can be game changers. They can be exciting, and we've really eliminated that from football. So I would bring those back.
Right, yeah, I do agree with you with that. You had brought up the safety issue, which is a huge issue in the NFL right now. Sure. There's also the factor that, it kind of takes away from the game, like what you said. Yeah. However, Commissioner Jonathan would probably update the challenge policy.
Okay.
As it is now, currently in the NFL, you are not allowed to challenge penalties.
Right.
You can challenge virtually anything else. You can challenge, the spot on the field. You can challenge
inbounds or out of bounds.
Inbounds or out of bounds.
You can challenge whether it's a catch or not a catch. Yeah.
Right. So I believe the game still suffers from coaches not being able to challenge penalties, because I have seen refs actually admit some mistakes that they have made, some calls. Sure. And some of them are really big calls that are game-changing. Like they alter the game. So I would say if you can add that back into it, I think that would add value to the game.
Okay, so I would bring back kickoffs. You would allow coaches to challenge penalties using the same challenge rules. So it's just one of the things they could challenge, and they have to decide themselves whether or not they're going to challenge it. I think that would be good. In the NBA, this is probably my biggest one, because this is my biggest complaint about sports in general, is this right here in the NBA. If I were Commissioner Kevin of the NBA, I would only allow each team one timeout in the last minute of the game. One of the most annoying things about watching an NBA game is if it's close, in the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes of the game, usually the last 2 minutes of a game. I'm only leaving it for the last minute, but in the last 2 minutes of the game, it's like they play for 3 seconds, then they call a timeout. They play for 4 seconds, the other team calls a timeout. And that's last minute and a half of the game can take 20 minutes to play of real time. Right. And so you've been watching this game. It's been fun. It's been exciting. It's been up and down and really interesting. And then suddenly it comes to a grinding halt in the last minute and a half as they basically play a half-court game, blah, 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 timeout. I would only allow each team one timeout in the last minute of the game. So you have to be smart about how and where you use it if it's a close game. But just let them play. Let them play for the last minute. I coach middle school basketball, okay? And sometimes the last minute of the game is the most intense thing. I had my girls' basketball team actually won their championship game.
Congratulations.
A couple of weeks ago, yes. The score of the final game was 22-20. My girls were actually winning 22-18 with 2 minutes, or 22-16 with 2 minutes left in the game. And the other team scored 4 points, and it was a back and forth, real intense thing. And the other team had the ball with about 15 seconds to go, and I had no timeouts left, and it was very exciting to just let my girls do it. I did have a timeout. I called a timeout with 9 seconds. I would have actually. I wasn't there, but the coach who was there, I was sick. The coach who was there called a timeout with 9 seconds to go, but it was very exciting, very intense for those last couple minutes. And I think the NBA could benefit from that kind of intensity in the last minute.
It would probably get a little getting used to. I mean, you might have a lot more Chris Webber plays, but then again, you'll have a lot.
Think about the entertainment value.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Agree with you 100% with that. But also, you get, as you say, a lot more exciting at the end of the game as well. You might get a little more, Isaiah Thomas plays, when Bird steals an inbound pass. Yep. Granted, I believe they did have a timeout. They just didn't call it.
Yep.
But say if they didn't have the timeout, situations like that, would happen, and teams would have to
let the athletes
prepare for that.
Make athletic plays.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things I would change in the NBA. But if I were to choose one, something that's a little interesting, and it kind of deals with the international game. In the international ball, like the Olympics, the offensive team are allowed offensive goaltending. So once a shot goes up and the ball hits the rim, once it hits the rim, the ball becomes fair game. So
it doesn't matter if it's over the cylinder or whatever.
Exactly. And I've noticed in the international game when Team USA plays, Spain or Yugoslavia or whatever that country's name is now right now. I see the international players going for offensive rebounds a lot more aggressively, and I think the United States can actually benefit from that rule, because I don't know if you've watched Team USA, but they can definitely out offensive rebound other teams.
Right.
And I believe,
but they don't, because they don't play with the same rules in a regular game. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're brought up not to touch the ball
Right.
unless it's out of the cylinder or the ball is out of the cylinder.
Right.
So I think that that would definitely help NBA basketball just to make it more like the international game. And I think Team USA would easily score maybe 10 points
As
more
if
a game.
Team USA needs any help scoring in any of these international contests.
Some games become scary. Some games
yeah.
with Spain.
Especially in the non-Olympic years. It seems like in the
Yeah.
Olympic years, Team USA blows everybody away. But when you have those tournaments in between the Olympic years, they don't win all the time. Not only do they not win it again, they don't win the tournament all the time. They lost several years in a row. They lost that tournament, and I don't know if the offensive rebounding change would have helped them win those or not. But Team USA is not as dominant in those off Olympic years as they are in the Olympic years. Right. Of course, they don't always get the top players in the off Olympic years, also. Yeah. But even so, I think that's a fascinating one because we've been growing up watching the NBA, and we just know you can't touch the ball over the cylinder.
Right.
You got to stay back, and to be able to go. I mean, not me personally because I can't get up there, but other larger men who can get up there.
Sean Bradley.
Like Sean Bradley. Wait a minute. I don't think he's any bigger than I am. But anyway.
George Mirasan?
There we go. Thank you. NHL. I know you have a pretty controversial one.
Yes. Mine doesn't really deal with the NHL game or rules themselves, but it's with the broadcasting. I have not watched a lot of hockey in my years on planet Earth here, but I do remember 15 years ago or so.
Somewhere in there. 10 years ago maybe.
When the game was being broadcast, they would actually make the puck glow. Now I know diehard NHL fans did not like that at all, but from an outsider looking in, it kind of helped me follow the game a little bit.
Right. I think the most difficult thing about hockey is that it's very hard to follow on TV because you can't see the puck. It's almost as though even the announcers are surprised when someone scores. It's like, oh, he scored! It comes out of nowhere. They're totally surprised by it because they can't see the puck either.
Right.
And I've found if you attend a live game, you can follow the action, but on TV, it's very difficult to follow.
Especially if you don't have HD television.
HD has made it better.
It has. It has.
Well, mine is even more controversial for the NHL. One of the things that drives me crazy, this happens to soccer too, but I don't even care about soccer. If I were Coach Kevin of the NHL, or not Coach Kevin, if I were Commissioner Kevin of the NHL, I would eliminate ties in the NHL. I think as a fan, I pay $50-$60 to go to a game. All right, and I buy a hot dog, and I buy a cola, and I buy some popcorn, so I spent another $30. All right, and then I go and I watch a tie. There's no winner at the end. It's very unsatisfying, and it's the only sport that allows ties, except for soccer. But I mean, of the four major sports, it's the only one that has a tie. Well, I guess the NFL does.
In some cases, NFL.
The NFL, but it's very, very rare in the NFL. I know the point system would get messed up a little bit in the NHL if you took away the ties, because they deal with points as opposed to win-loss record. But it just seems to me that if you could eliminate ties, the casual fan would be more interested in the game. Like myself. Again, I'm not really a big hockey fan. I'm a casual fan of hockey. And it's just very unsatisfying to walk away from a tie.
Right.
And so that's what I would do. I would get rid of the ties. I know hockey fans are going to hate that. That's one of the things they like about the game, but to me, as someone who's not a big hockey fan, it's just kind of a blah thing. You leave a game and it's a tie.
One thing I will say about hockey, that I do agree that they do let the players play more than all the other sports.
Yes.
And I commend them for that. I mean, I know they go, fisticuffs with each other. But if you do that in the NBA, you look at someone the wrong way, right. You slapped with a technical. It's not like what it used to be like in the 80s, Rambis. McHale taking out Rambis like that. If that happens in today's NBA.
It was a Bird and Moses Malone.
Yeah, that was a great one with Charles Barkley holding him back. Yeah. But so I think other sports had kind of lost that. I don't know, you want to keep people safe, but there is that awe factor when something happens. Like right. we like seeing celebrities in this case going at it sometimes with all their emotions up in the air. So I think the NHL has not lost that, and I do commend them for that.
And I think people talk about the 70s and the checking in the NHL. It was so much better, but I watch an NHL game now, and it's still pretty good. I mean, you know,
People still bleed.
Yeah, people up against the boards and they just plow into the guy. It's awesome. So anyway, that's what we would change. Believe it or not, that one topic took us to our break time in this show.
Wow.
But we have a lot of things we want to change about sports apparently, and it's good to talk about that. So we are going to take a break here on The Big Picture, and we're going to have a few messages from a couple of our friends here. We'll be back in just a moment. We hope you're enjoying our conversation on The Big Picture. Abundant Life Christian School is a school committed to the nurture of the whole child, academically, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Our staff have been called by God to enter the teaching profession. As evidence of God's call, they are dedicated to and gifted in the task of helping parents grow kids God's way. Academically, students are engaged in the combination of the best of both worlds, tradition and innovation. Character values are emphasized throughout days that focus on a broad educational experience and a strong academic foundation. To learn more about Abundant Life Christian School, please go to our website at www.ablifeschool.org. Well, welcome back to The Big Picture. My name is Kevin Vendt. I am the host of this show and the producer also, and we're having a lot of fun here. We talked about things we would change about sports in the first half of the show. In the second half of the show, we're going to talk about who we think some of the best players are in some of the sports in our lifetime. That's what we're going to do in the second half of the show. So welcome. Again, my name is Kevin Vendt. This is Jonathan Vendt. He is my guest today.
Expert analyst.
Expert analyst. That's right. So one of the things that we talk about when we're sitting in my basement or in your living room watching sports is we always kind of come up with random topics about various things. Sometimes it's stretchy, guys, but when we're talking about sports, one of the things that we talk about is who's the best player, now, or who's the best player at this position. If you were putting together a team, who would you want? So one of the things I wanted to talk about is the all-time NBA team. And when we talk about all-time NBA, I'm really kind of saying players that you have seen play, or players who played while you've been interested in the NBA or in your lifetime or something like that. So we're not going back to Bill Sharman and George Mirasan.
George Mirasan. No. George Mirasan's on my team.
Okay. We're not going back that far. For me, I kind of thought of that as players who have played since 1980. You had talked about 80, 90, somewhere in there. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So if you were putting together your all NBA team of all time from the time that you've been watching sports, what would you do?
Well, I'm kind of afraid to date myself right now, but since you asked, my all-time NBA team, the starters would be, I would have Irvin Magic Johnson at point guard, Michael Jordan at point guard, not point guard.
The shooting guard.
Shooting guard, thank you. Right. Expert analyst. I have Larry Bird at small forward, Tim Duncan at power forward, and I would have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at center.
Okay. Interesting list. Ironically, we prepared our list separately. And of course, it's not as though we never talked about this before, but we actually were the same down the board except for one player. I also had Magic at point. I had Jordan as a two guard. I had Bird, Duncan, but my center is Shaquille O'Neal. And the reason I chose Shaquille is just in the time that I've been watching, I really feel he is the most dominant center of all time. Hard to go against Kareem, highest point scored in NBA history. And you've got to take that into consideration. But he was never a dominant force in my lifetime. the way that Shaquille was. Now, Kareem earlier in his career, before I really paid attention to basketball, was more dominant. When he was Lou Alcindor. But I can't take that, according to my rules, I can't take that into consideration. It's only in the time that I've been watching since 1980 or so. So I picked Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille versus Shaq, why? Shaquille versus Kareem, why?
Kareem's got the grace, I'm 33 years old, so I barely remember Kareem Abdul-Jabbar playing. I do like his free throw percentage compared to Shaq's, and I'm a big free throw guy. I cannot stand, a lot of these centers or at any position in the NBA just not being able to knock down your free throws. And in today's NBA, a lot of games are really decided by free throws
because of all the timeouts.
Because all the timeouts, right? So that's one of the main reasons why I take Kareem over Shaquille O'Neal at center.
Yeah, I thought about that, obviously, but Shaquille was such a dominating physical presence. Kareem had that one unstoppable shot, the sky hook, and he milked it for, 35,000 points or something like that. And, that's what he did, and no one could stop it, so I would have done the same thing.
Absolutely.
But Shaquille, to me, was a dominating presence inside. Kareem, in his younger days, was a good defensive player. He didn't dominate the way Shaquille did. And that's kind of, I was on record as saying that Shaquille would never win a title until he developed a 12-foot jump shot. And lo and behold, he developed a 12-foot jump shot and won a bunch of titles.
Right, because when he first entered the league, you were more of an Alonzo Mourning type
I was
of guy.
a Mourning guy.
They both came in the same time in the league, and you were all about Alonzo Mourning.
Yep.
But it's funny how history presents itself.
How history changes itself, yeah.
I will say this, Shaquille O'Neal does have a video game, Shaq Fu. So, yeah, I mean, you also have to consider that. I mean, he must be better, right?
Yeah. I did do a second team also. Kareem is my second team center. Just to go through, my power forward on the second team was Kevin Garnett. Gotta love Kevin Garnett. Surprisingly, LeBron James, even though I hate him, as my small forward. I didn't choose another two guard because there is no one after Jordan. And I put John Stockton in as my alternate point guard. Did you have a second team?
Yeah, my second team is very similar to yours. I actually did put a shooting guard in. I mean, Michael Jordan is the best. Yes, everyone knows that. But I just put his heir apparent in there. I put Kobe Bryant for my shooting guard, my second shooting guard. And for center, instead of Shaquille O'Neal, I completely agree with you with Shaquille O'Neal being a number one guy, number two guy, even a number three guy in my case. Me, this is kind of it's not a homer pick, but I've always liked Hakeem Olajuwon, and I put him as my second spot. Again, I'm more of a finesse type of guy. I'm not, I really liked his post moves back in
the dream.
Yeah, early to mid '90s. It's just,
and he did win a couple championships. Admittedly, it's only because Jordan was gone. But I mean, he basically led two different. I actually went to the championship 3 times and won 2 titles.
And he was also a defensive stopper as well.
Yeah, he was a great shot blocker. Actually, not just a good shot blocker, a great shot blocker.
Right.
He would be considered one of the best shot blockers of all time if didn't exist.
He was referencing Dikembe Mutombo.
Sorry, Dikembe Mutombo, yeah. I mean, he would be considered, if not the greatest, one of the greatest of all time. And Bill Russell was a great shot blocker, too, but he doesn't count for our list because he didn't play while we've been around.
And George Mirasan.
Yes. All right, so that's the NBA. We also did the same thing with Major League Baseball. And the way I thought of it with Major League Baseball is I wanted to put together, again, player at each position, but I was also kind of trying to think about a lineup a little bit, too. So I wasn't just choosing the guy with the most home runs or the most hits or something like that. I was really trying to think about a hitting lineup as well as positions. So this is what I came up with in Major League Baseball. My first baseman is a current player, actually, Albert Pujols, King Albert. My second baseman is Ryne Sandberg. My third baseman, and this is a controversial one because when we talked about this, I had forgotten a couple guys and then I went back and forth, but I decided to stick with my first instinct, which was Wade Boggs. We'll talk about why in a second.
Homer.
Well, that's part of it. Part of it is the Homer pick. Yeah, I fully recognize that. My shortstop is Ozzie Smith. My left fielder is Ricky Henderson, best base stealer of all time. My center fielder is probably the best player of my lifetime, Ken Griffey Jr. And my right fielder is Tony Gwynn, catcher, Pudge Rodriguez, starting pitcher, Pedro Martinez. In my opinion, the best starting pitcher I ever saw play in my lifetime. And there's been a ton of great starting pitchers going back to Tom Seaver and Jim Palmer and Ron Guidry only in 1978. But I mean, Pedro, those 3 seasons of Pedro, 98 through 2002, I guess 4 seasons. Nobody could touch him. I'm just the best. And considering it was the steroid era, best of my time.
Unbelievable.
Relief pitcher, I had a hard time choosing. I ultimately went with Mariano Rivera, even though he's a Yankee. Over Raleigh Fingers, it's a tough call. but I did go with Mariano Rivera. And then my DH is Frank Thomas. What did you do
Good
for Major
selection.
League Baseball? I mean, that would be a tough team, and to play. I mean, any of these teams are going to be tough to play. But
Yeah, I mean, my team is obviously pretty similar to yours. We have some differences, which would be even more fun to watch play against each other. For first base, I also have Pujols. Second base, I have Roberto Alomar. I've got to witness him to play more just because of my age. I just enjoyed watching him play with defensively and offensively. My shortstop is Cal Ripken. I chose him over the Wizard. I mean, I hate to do this. I love Wizards.
he loves Wizards.
But I picked him over.
Not the Washington Wizards. Though.
Yeah, that's the only Wizard I don't
like
like. I chose Cal Ripken over Ozzie Smith because of the offense. And his defense, it wasn't as good as Ozzie Smith, but his defense is still pretty stellar.
Right.
For third base, I put Mike Schmidt.
And this was the struggle.
Yeah,
I can't believe when I made my list, I totally forgot about Mike Schmidt.
Right.
And the other one I forgot about was George Brett.
Yeah.
I think any of those, Chipper Jones falls into there also. Any of those guys would be great picks. I picked Bogsy partially because of my lineup thing, because I'm thinking of him as a contact hitter. Mike Schmidt didn't have anywhere close to the batting average of Wade Boggs, but of course his power numbers and his defense superior to Boggs. They're not even close.
Right.
But so I was the dual thinking, partially a homer pick and partially thinking of a lineup as well as just individual numbers.
Well thought out.
I also, one of the things I love about Mike Schmidt, by the way, I just have to point this out. One of the things I love about Mike Schmidt, 1989, making millions of dollars, had a contract for another couple of years, said, you know what? I stink. I quit. No, what athlete does that? Normally they try to ride it out and milk them for as much cash as they can get. And he still was a fairly productive player, but he's just like, you know what? I'm not the Mike Schmidt I used to be. I'm done. Love that about Mike Schmidt.
Right. That's why I picked him at my third baseman.
Right. So anyway, your third
because
baseman.
I want him to quit once he stinks. Once he has like a 4-game hitless streak or something. At catcher, I put Ivan Rodriguez. I refuse to call him Pudge because there's only one Pudge.
Pudge Fisk.
Our outfielder is pretty similar. I have Ricky Henderson, mainly because I want him for the leadoff spot. I don't know why you would not want Ricky Henderson in your leadoff spot. For your center fielder, I have Ken Griffey Jr. as well. By probably the best player, all-around player in my lifetime. And for my right fielder, I put Ichiro Suzuki.
Ichiro.
Again, I love the contact hitting, and I would love him batting at number 9. I mean,
that would be a great...
he, a lot of people say, "Oh, why don't you lead him off?" It's because he does not have the on-base percentage that a Ricky Henderson would give you.
Ricky Henderson also, a lot of people don't remember this, had more home runs at a leadoff spot than any player in Major League history.
Right.
And not that, but to start off a game with a home run, you immediately have a run. That helps your pitcher a lot, actually, especially if it's a home game.
Yeah.
I would assume especially a away game, where you before the pitcher even pitches, he's got a 1-run lead. So.
I also enjoy his defensive skills. I mean, in right field, he has an absolute cannon for an arm.
Well, Ichiro does, yeah.
So I love that. One of my favorite plays in baseball are like the right fielders gunning people down at home plate.
Sure.
So awesome.
Sure.
And starting pitcher, obviously I picked Pedro Martinez. Again, I've said the same thing. Me to Pedro Martinez is John Madden to Brett Favre. For my closer, I put Mariano Rivera. And for my DH, this is my homer pick. I pick Ortiz.
Ortiz, best clutch hitter in Red Sox history. I had 3 DHs actually. I ended up with Frank Thomas because the overall combination of batting average, on base percentage, and power better than any DH in history. He did play first base for the first 5 or 6 years of his career. My second DH was actually Edgar Martinez, who I think was the best overall DH, who played DH pretty much his entire career. I think he played shortstop for about 12 minutes. But best batting average, really, of any pure DH. I had Ortiz third because I'm a homer pick. But I mean, Ortiz has played DH the majority of his career, and you look at his numbers, they stack up very evenly. People kind of get on Frank Thomas a little bit because he didn't have the power numbers he could have had. And they've argued that if he let himself swing away a little more, he would have hit a few more home runs. But I love the on-base percentage. Could have had a few more RBIs maybe swinging away, but that's the way he chose to do his game. Well, we are out of time here on The Big Picture, and we have only talked about 3 of our 12 topics, but that's okay because we can do this again sometime.
Part 2.
I thank you for joining us on The Big Picture. I hope you've enjoyed some of our thoughts, and you can share some of your thoughts if you see us around town or whatever. Who would be your best NBA or MLB players of all time that you've watched? Let us know. Thank you for joining us here on The Big Picture. My name is Kevin Vendt. I have been your host. Have a good day. Take care.